My name is Tiandra Raber, and I am part of the EPAY support team. Myself and Christian Contreras make up the majority of the EPAY support team here at IT Corporate. So today's class is just going to be an overview of some of the basic features in Blueforce, going over some of the various roles, how to make some edits, how to just some basic options and settings and things that you can do in Blueforce. And just a reminder, as with all of our webinars, everybody is muted. So if you have a question, please use the question box there on the GoToWebinar, and I will be periodically checking questions and answering them as quickly and as best as I can throughout the webinar. This webinar is scheduled to be pretty full, so if by any chance I do not get to your question, I will make sure that I answer it right after the webinar, just directly to you, whomever poses a question that I don't get to. So again, everyone is muted, and just pose your questions there on the control panel. So a little bit about Blueforce. There are various roles in the system. You have an employee, a reviewer, editor, submitter, and approver. With each of those different roles, there's different access to the system. Of course, employee is anyone hired into JDE, an ISS hourly employee, and they are able to use all time collection methods, including the clocks, the phone-in, other type of manager that would have access to a computer, and they are able to actually log into the Blueforce application and make edits to time cards and timesheets, with the exception that they cannot submit the corrected timesheet. Your submitter is your district managers, again, with the ability to log into Blueforce. They can make the same additions and edits to the time card, and they are making any necessary corrections to time cards and timesheets. They would submit the timesheet to the approver, an office admin person, or possibly a payroll staff there at your site, and they do also have the ability to make additions and edits. Keeping in mind that we would like to remind you that the approver should just be the person doing reviews, not making a lot of edits and not making a lot of additions. The approvers do alerts, they can do mass upload of PTO, and they are the ones that if you did submit your timesheets and you need to make a correction, you would go to your approver and have them reject and reopen your timesheets so that you guys can go back in and make any edits. And I'll go over that as we get logged into the Blueforce application. So just a quick EPAY overview. A lot of you are pretty familiar with this, but if there's anyone new on the call, Blueforce is the time and attendance collection application. You can use it on a mobile application on a smartphone. You can call in on a telephone, you can use the web punch, or you can use the Walter time clocks. All of those punches get put into or uploaded to Blueforce. Blueforce communicates with JDE, and JDE is the source application for all of your employee information and all of your job information. And they talk to each other on a regular basis every 30 minutes during the day for employee changes and job changes. So as the time is entered into Blueforce, and your payrolls are submitted and approved, then that information and that data gets moved over to JDE for your payroll processing. So we're going to begin a little bit with an employee overview. And we're going to go ahead with the clock. Many of you are familiar with the Walter devices at your site. So I'm just going to kind of go briefly over how an employee will use the Walter. Please note that once an employee is hired in JDE and their information moves over to Blueforce, the employee can immediately start to use the clocks or immediately start to use the phone-in. As I said, they have the ability to use all of the methods, but if you have an employee that you need set up with the mobile app or with access to Web Punch, you do need to submit a help desk ticket to Christian and I, because they do need to have a username and password set up to use those applications. So again, any employee can immediately start to use a Walter clock or the phone-in as soon as they are hired into JDE and their information moves over to Blueforce. So here's a picture of the Walter devices, and the login process is dual security. Employees do need to have the biometrics, so they do need to have their fingerprint and their employee numbers to clock in and clock out. So they would approach the Walter using their left hand. They would place their index finger into the biometric reader. They would enter their employee number, and then they would just press the reader to get a scan on their fingerprint. And from here, they would get their employee menu. The employee main menu basically has these 5 options: to clock in, to clock out, change language, lunch break, and work pay information. It's a pretty basic screen. They would just need to select what they're doing, either they're clocking in or clocking out. And for those sites that do require that they punch in and punch out for a lunch break, they can select the lunch break option. We do recommend, if it's not mandated at your site, to go ahead and have the system automatically set up to deduct your lunches. That way you're just giving less error for a punch to be missed or selected incorrectly. So they would just pick the option that they need to do, clock in, clock out, and then, or to start their lunch break, you could select start lunch break, and they would get a message or a screen that tells them exactly what's happening. Here the screen shows you to start your lunch break or end your lunch break. So for the lunch break option, you do have to do a little bit more. You're either going to start your lunch break or you're ending your lunch break. And you're going to get a confirmation that your lunch break has started or your lunch break has stopped. And then here's an example of a confirmation screen. All the confirmation screens look exactly the same. It's going to tell them exactly what they've done, and it's going to have a time and date stamp. The next thing that's available to the employees is a work pay information. For this selection, they can actually go in and look at their hours on the clock and get a small little printout of their hours worked. Each Walter is set up with a roll of thermal paper that can be changed out if needed. We do have it set up to where you can order that if you ever need to get that ordered. If you have any questions, you can always contact Christian and I in regards to getting any paper refills. But anyways, they can go into the work pay information. They'd select number 5. Then they would click on view attendance, and it automatically defaults to the current week that they're working. And here the employee can view or print information relating to their hours worked. Across the bottom are the 4 buttons that correspond with the 4 buttons on the Walter clock. So like I said, it automatically defaults to the current week. But if you're a biweekly payroll or even a weekly payroll, they can always select the button to go to the previous week to look at their hours for the previous week worked. And then there's a print button that they can select print, and they'll get a little printout that they can take with them that gives them their total hours worked. So moving along. So now we're going to get to the reviewer. The reviewer role is primarily set up for supervisors to do some minimal edits and corrections at the Walters. This helps with the overall payroll process if you can get any edits done at the night that the shift is worked, then it's easier for the next step of your editors and submitters. It's just less that they have to correct on their own. If you've got a site supervisor that can be set up as a reviewer, at the end of the shift, they can take a few minutes to just quickly look to see if there are any issues for on any employee that had worked that previous shift. And anyone with a role of reviewer or above is automatically set up with supervisor access on the clocks. And when I say that, the supervisors are going to be the ones you would like to go ahead and have them register new employees on the clock. I should retract a little bit. The employees can use the clock once they are hired, but they do have to have a registered fingerprint on the clock. So I apologize, I did misstate that. But they are available to immediately use the clock once they have a registered fingerprint on the clock. The clocks are set up to where the employee can make 3 attempts, and then it will go ahead and let them clock in, even without a registered fingerprint. As long as they have access to the job that's set up on the clock, it will fail and give them a message saying your supervisor must approve this, but it will let them clock in. So make sure your supervisors are equipped with the employee numbers that they need to be registering, and they're going to try to register one finger. Normally it's going to be the index finger. We have had a few instances where it had to be another finger, but register one finger on the left hand because the keypad's on the right, and you're going to capture 3 fingerprint images during the registration. So you're going to try to make sure your supervisors properly train the employees to walk up straight to the Walter, insert their registered finger, input their employee number, and click the scan button. So the supervisor will do the same thing as the employees. They're going to enter in their employee number, and then they're going to have an extra option on the menu for the administrative menu. That's the difference between an employee and the supervisor, is just that extra menu option. And again, anybody with a reviewer role or higher can put their information or their employee number on a clock and get the administrative menu. And one thing too, with anybody who is set up as a reviewer or above, when you put your employee number on a clock, you're going to automatically be prompted as soon as the system recognizes your employee number for any issues, whether it's a fingerprint issue or missed punches. You're going to get a message right at the beginning letting you know that there's issues that need to be taken care of. So once the supervisor enters in their number and goes into the administrative menu, they can pick option 2, which is modify existing or register new employees. What they'll do is they'll go ahead and enter in the employee number. They'll select the OK, the checkbox. And this is where they'll begin to take the 3 scanned images of the fingerprint. Now, please keep in mind, and you can note to your employees, this is not a true fingerprint reading. This is just taking a quick snapshot of a few of the different points on a person's fingerprint. That's it. Not a true fingerprint image, just a small picture. So the employee is going to place their finger in the reader, and then you're going to just hit the scan button and you're going to begin to take a picture. The boxes there at the top where it says capture are either going to be green, which is good, or red, which tells you you'll need to lift the finger and reposition and start and take the picture again. So what you're looking for is the green box. And what I've learned with this system is if you get a green box, go ahead and accept it. because you will find out that employees are not going to walk up to the clock the exact way each and every time. So it's good to just, if you get a green light, go ahead and accept it. And like I said, if it's bad, it's going to give you a red. You just have them lift their finger and you're going to rescan the picture again. So once you get all 3 green boxes filled, you're going to go ahead and accept all 3. And if you can see on this screen, towards the bottom, there is a percentage matching. You can kind of keep an eye on that. And what I found that works best is if you can get a range. If you can get, like this one shows 34%, you can get one that's low, one that's medium, one that's high. That tends to work the best when you're getting your fingerprint pictures. Because like I said, no one walks up to the clock the exact same way, puts their finger in, and goes. So once you get all 3 pictures captured, you're going to go ahead and accept it. It's going to download that information to the clock. It's going to ask you to go ahead and select the language. Currently, we still are just offering the 4 languages of English, Spanish, Polish, and French. So you'll select their language. And then you can either A, register another employee, or you can exit out of the menu and go about what you need to continue working on. So again, if you've got new sites starting up or you've got new employees, this is what will need to happen each time new employees start, is to go ahead and get their fingerprints registered on the clock as quickly as possible, and we'll get them moving into their job. So here's an example of when a supervisor logs in to the clock, and if there's any issues, they're going to immediately get a yellow message across the top telling them exactly what needs to be handled. So in this instance, you can see it's telling this supervisor, you have 5 mismatched fingerprints. And they have the options to either approve now selectively or just approve all. I always recommend that you go ahead and do approve now selectively. That way, if you can see that there is an employee that's continually having issues, we always ask a couple of things. We always ask that you try to re-register the fingerprint, which is just going back through the picture process again. Try that by re-registering. That usually normally covers about, I don't know, 80–90% of the problems. But we do realize in the business that we're in, you're going to have employees that you just can't get a good fingerprint picture, and that's perfectly fine. Just reach out to Christian and I, open a help desk ticket, and let us know the employee. And there's other steps that we can take to make sure that they have a smooth process when clocking in at the clock. So let's say that they decided that they didn't have time. Your supervisor logged in. Maybe they're an hourly employee. They clocked in and went on. They can always come back to the administrative menu at any time and go into the approved mismatched fingerprints. And it's going to give them a list just like this. And anything with asterisks is the ones that they're approving. So here it's saying this employee had problems both on their in and their out punch. And it's looking like every day this person's had an issue. So you might want to say, okay, let's go ahead and re-register your fingerprint and see if we can get these cleared up. So they can approve each line by moving up and down according to the buttons across the bottom. But at least this way you get a good picture of any employee that may be having chronic issues with their fingerprints on the clock. So now your supervisors do have the ability to edit punches on the clock. So under the supervisor menu, they can go into manage attendance. And you really want to use this if an employee maybe forgot to clock in and clocked out, or maybe they clocked out but didn't clock in. You want to try to limit it to just maybe those types of edits. You don't want your supervisors adjusting any time there on the clock. They have the ability, but you might want to just let them know that you just want them to make those type of corrections. Of course, the call is definitely yours depending on the site, but they have the ability to make several, if not all, of the edits and corrections on the clock, which then in turn helps your editors and submitters as the payroll process moves on through your week. Keep in mind that even on the Walter clocks, when edits are made or any other changes are done on the clock, it is flagged and highlighted also in Blueforce. So the audit trail does extend to the clocks. So once they go into view attendance, they can select to create a clock in, edit clock ins or outs, close open clock ins or outs, view attendance. So they'll just pick whatever they need to go into. And once you go in, normally it's going to be edit, clock in, or clock out, because once you go into that edit, it's going to immediately take you to where the issues are. So like here, it tells you that you have 2 open punches, and it tells you the following employees have not clocked in or out. And listed there, you can see these employees have clocked in, but there's no out time. So she would just, their supervisor would just pick the row, click the edit, and once you click edit, it takes you straight. So if they're on the current day, the date and time automatically brings you to that date and time, or date, and then they would just enter the time, whatever they needed to go in or out. They would just key that time. AM, PM, you can see the buttons down across the bottom that correlate to the different buttons. And then they would just hit the check mark to save. So here it says they're creating an in punch for this employee, because this employee did not clock in, but they clocked out. Once the edit's made, you click save. Same thing if you're entering a clock out. One thing that I do like about the Walters, and I'm not sure if you've noticed through the slides, is it's very intuitive and it's very easy because all the screens basically look the same. So whether you're editing punches, this is what your screen will look like. The next thing that the supervisors can do is they can print a daily report for all their employees, or they can print weekly reports for selected employees. So in order to go into the attendance reports, they would go into, they'll go into the option to view attendance, and it automatically takes them into, depending on how many sites are on the clock, if there's 1 site or multiple sites, you'll see it listed on the screen there, the different sites. And you can see, you can do it by day, you can go next day, previous day, and this shows you the entire shift for that particular day or evening. And then they can print that, and they can either turn that in, keep it for record, whatever they need to do with it. But they do have the ability to print out daily reports from the clocks and weekly reports from the clocks. So clocks sync because the Walter clock is the only device that is not real time, which means if an employee comes in and punches in on the clock, it does not automatically sync with Blueforce. The clocks are set up on a sync schedule, and most of the clocks, if we have not adjusted the sync schedule, most of the clocks are set up to sync 4 times a day, which means if a person clocked in at 7 a.m., that punch is not going to show up in Blueforce until 9 a.m. when that sync time occurs. So 3 a.m., 9 a.m., 3 p.m., and 9 p.m. with the exception of any of our LAN clocks, which are any of the clocks that are connected to a local area network. Those are sending punches every 5 minutes. So if an employee comes, clocks in, goes about their shift, that punch will update into Blueforce in 5 minutes. But that's only for the LAN clocks. And that's only for the punches, the clocks in and clock out. All the other data updates are still done at scheduled sync times. So if you're noticing that you need to see punches quicker or punches, you're not seeing the punches, please reach out to Christian and I, and we can work with you to set up a sync schedule. We can set up 12 different times that the clocks will communicate back to Blueforce. So now that's just going to move us on into where I will log into Blueforce, and we're going to go over some of the basic editing features for your editor, submitter, and approvers. So we're going to go over how you select your jobs. Some of you will have access to a few jobs, some of you will have access to entire districts, and some of you will have access to entire areas. So depending on what you want to work with, the system is driven by what you tell it. Then we're going to kind of go over how you add and edit time cards, maybe change a rate type, maybe change a task, how you split or allocate time. We're going to add hours, vacation sick. We're going to add edit time sheets, which is a little different. How you submit, reject, and approve timesheets, and how you can submit timesheets individually or by task or even by an entire job or group. So this is just a quick little overview. Your editor and submitter daily, we do recommend that you try to give 5 or 10 minutes a day just to kind of go into Blueforce and look at what's open. Just look at the open items and address those. So look, you're going to want to, on a daily basis, go in and just review for open punches, review for anything that might need an approval, which could be a fingerprint, which could be a phone-in issue, and I'll show those when we go into Blueforce in a moment here. And then weekly, the submitters are going to also want to just make sure there's nothing open for the previous week. Make sure that you've got all your vacation or sick or anything that you need to add also in for your week. And then once everything is corrected and everything looks correct, then you'll want to go ahead and submit your timesheets once they're complete and accurate, and that'll move them on to your approver. Your approver, it looks like they don't have a whole lot to do, but this is just kind of the basics for your timesheets and time, because we really want to work towards your approver not having to make all the edits and all the corrections. You want all those done at your editor and submitter roles, because usually those are the frontline people that know a lot more about what's happening at the site than the approver would. So the approver is just going to review and make sure the timesheets are submitted and that they're accurate. They're going to reject any timesheets that need to be rejected. So once you submit your timesheets, they are locked from any additions or edits. So if you have submitted a timesheet and you find that you have some hours that are incorrect, or maybe there's some hours missing, you need to reach out to your approver, let them know what the job number is, and they can open that timesheet and reject it, reopen it, so that you can make any edits or corrections. And then once everything is accurate and everybody's signed off, they would approve the timesheet, which then triggers that to go to corporate payroll for processing. So where do you make changes? Time card versus timesheets. The time card and timesheets, they really are two different things. So the time card are where you see your raw data, your total hours, your clock ins and your clock outs. What time they clocked in, what time they clocked out, and their total hours worked. And on the time card, you can change a job if the time is coded to an incorrect job. You can change a task. You can change a rate type. You can add any missed punches. And you can also add work orders or split time if you need to allocate time across different work orders or different jobs. The timesheet is where you see your calculations. If there's shift differentials, if there's lunch rules, that is where those are applied. If you have auto split set up, so if you have an employee that you automatically split time across several jobs, you will not see that in the time card, because again, the time card is your total hours worked. The timesheet is where the calculations take place. So if you have shift differentials set up, if you have auto split set up, if you have lunch deduction set up, that's where you will see those items is on the timesheet. So all calculations are seen on the timesheet. And if at any time you see that something is not calculating correctly, whether it's OT, shift differentials, lunch, please open a help desk ticket and let Christian and I know so that we can help you get it resolved quickly so you're not having to go in and make too many manual changes. The system can work for you as long as we know what it is that you need. A lot of times we don't always know that this job needs a 30-minute lunch. So instead of you having to go in and make that 30-minute lunch deduction, let us know. I always say if there's something that you find yourself doing every day or every week, reach out to Christian and I and say, hey, I'm having to make this manual change every payroll. Is there something we can set up in the system? And majority of the time the system can do it. There's a few exceptions, but for the most part we can get the system set up to do that for you to where you won't have to make those manual changes. So now I'm going to get my Blueforce login up. Sorry, bear with me. Sorry, technical difficulties. We love computers. All right, so this is the Blueforce login screen. Now, the Blueforce application is different than your mobile punch application and your web punch application. The mobile punch, of course, is done on a smartphone. The web punch is also accessible on a computer, but it is a different link and it will tell you web punch. So you just need to make sure if you've got users who are trying to log into web punch that they're actually logging into web punch and they're not logging into Blueforce. So I'm going to go ahead and log into Blueforce. If I can type. Most of you get the dashboard. This is just an overview. So this is the Blueforce home screen. Most of you will see exactly what I'm seeing. You have your dashboard, you have your employees, jobs. Usually right down the middle where the blue arrows are, it kind of gives you, this is your step. This is how you walk through the system. It starts out with employees because your employees have to come in, and then job, but the system is basically driven off of what jobs are you wanting to work with. Depending on your access, you're going to have access to one job, multiple jobs, districts, or entire areas, or several areas. So you always want to make sure that you've told the system what jobs you want to work with. So that's always key. So you'll come in, you always get your home screen, you're going to go to your jobs, and you're going to tell the system what you want to work with. If at any time that you're working on a time card or a timesheet and you're not seeing everything, just verify what your job selection is. You may not have all your jobs selected. So I'm going to just work with my main office at the time. And if I go back, I know that in my main office I've got 3 jobs. So these are the 3 jobs that I'm currently going to be working with. And I'm going to go to time cards. The system automatically defaults to the current day, which basically is the evening prior into the current day. So I'm just going to back my dates up a little bit because these are our test punches. And usually it's going to default to all punches, but you might probably, if you're pressed for time or you just want to take a quick glance, when you're in here to look at your edits, change your punch type and tell you to show you what's open. So you're going to search for 0 and you're going to search for open. Not sure how much I'm going to have open. I'm going to go select a couple more jobs. Oh, I don't have access to that job. let me see, I'm going to just search all the jobs that I have access to on this profile. We're going to go back in. So for this date range, I'm going to include this week. Show me what's open. So this is just a quick overview. If you need to log in and make any edits or log in and see what might potentially you need to make corrections on, and just go ahead and change your punch type here to show you what's open. And that's instead of showing you all the punches, which is everything in the system or everything everybody did, you want to just say, show me open. Show me what my issues are. So here you'll see a couple here. Everything that's needing your attention is going to be black with red lettering, and it tells you exactly what it's needing. Waiting for out, these all say waiting for out. And if I can see, like these first few three, this is today's date. These employees have clocked in. They're probably still working their shifts. I don't need to worry about those. Just always keep in mind that the system the system looks at those punches as an open punch because it doesn't have an out. So anything that's missing an in or an out, anything that's needing an approval here is always going to be considered an open punch, which means it doesn't flow to the timesheet. So if the hours are on the time card are considered open, then you won't see those hours reflect on the timesheet. So you're always going to want to come into your time card and just review what's open. The timesheet tells you the same information. It's just you can't see it unless you click on. So when you're looking at your timesheet, if you've got open issues, you'll see the numbers listed here next to the time card or next to the timesheet, and you can click on that number and it'll tell you and take you exactly to where you need to correct. So here it took me in and this person clocked in, but they didn't clock out. So you can see the same thing from the timesheet, but we're just going to work in the time cards for right now because most of the editors are going to be working here at the time card level. So once you go in and you see your open items, so here it's telling you it's waiting for out. So you'll need to, what you can do is you just select that line. You're going to click Edit. And from here, there's several things you can do to edit this punch. You can change the job. And the job list here is driven off of two things. It's driven off your job selection, and it's driven off of what this employee has access to work. Now, if you are not seeing the job, let's say an employee was sent to a job site just temporarily. If you're not seeing the job, you can now easily add it as an editor and above. I'll show you that in a minute. So here, like I said, when you go to edit a line of time, there's several things you can do. You can change the job. You can change the tasks, and the tasks are built on the model of cleaning, landscape, all those different. You can change the rate type here. I wouldn't recommend doing it here though, but you can. You can change the rate type. And then here's where you would add the missing punch. You can add a work order if there's no work order assigned to the job. And then you always have to give a reason code. So he came in at 9. Let's say that on the 16th he left at 14:30. We'll go ahead and add a work order. And then if you don't give it a reason code and you try to save it, the system's going to give you a green or red dot. And anytime you get a red dot when you're making any edits, you can hold your mouse over it and it's going to tell you exactly what the problem is. It could be reason code, it could be overlapping, but it tells you right here what you need to do. So here I forgot my reason code. You can pick a reason code here. I'm going to just say employee fault. He knows how to use the system, but he forgot to punch out. And when I save it this time, I get the green dot. And now I can just close it. And that's off my screen because I'm only looking at my open issues. So as you go in and you clear all your open issues, then you can go back and you can look at all punches if you'd like and look at anything else. As you start using Blueforce and moving forward, you'll notice you'll see a lot of different colors, and you'll get used to the various methods that your job sites are using. And there's also a legend here that tells you if anything was edited from the Walter, if anything was edited from mobile, anything was done in Blueforce, the phone-in. Or you can also, and you highlight any of these punches, so anything that's just plain old black and white is going to be a Walter punch. So if you hold your mouse over, it tells you employee punched in using a Walter. Here's a green, it says employee punched in using IVR, which is our phone-in. Here it says time out added from time cards, so it's yellow, which you can notate as a manual edit. And this is just orange because we updated and added the work order, but because we made an edit to the punch, it gets highlighted in orange. And then down here in blue, we've got employee punched in using iPunch, which is web punch. So you'll start getting familiar, depending on what your sites use, the various colors of the different collection methods. So we still have a few issues here. If there were any approval issues, which I'm not seeing any right now. Oops. You also, when something is open, you'll see something over here also that'll say waiting for approval. And usually it's going to be either a fingerprint, which on the clock you would see the square black with yellow letters, and it would just let you know that this employee had an issue with the fingerprint. Or it would be black with green, which means that the phone-in wasn't registered. All right, so just to kind of go over again, everything that you do on the time card, you can select and edit, and from that window, again, you can change the job if you have to, change the task, change the rate, try not to mess with the punches, this is good punches, or add a work order, and then save it. If you're needing to allocate time, here on these, in this column here to the left of the time card, you can split the time card, or you can, if you need to split it, I should say, and allocate time to different jobs or different work orders, then you can select split time card. So it's always going to start you with the default job and the hours. So it's 10 hours, so you have to make sure as you begin allocating time to various jobs or work orders, you need to make sure your time at the end totals. So let's say I'm going to take this 10 hours and I'm going to just split it up a little bit. So now I'm going to just say for this first one, he's just going to stay at 8. And then here, I could change the job if I wanted to, but I'm going to leave the job and I'm going to just say he worked on this work order for 1 hour. And then I'll leave the job and he's going to work this work order for the other hour. Oops. Sorry. And then as you notice that the before time and the after time equal. If they didn't equal, it won't let you save it. So here, and if I need to add additional jobs, add additional work orders, I would just keep adding a row and just making sure that I split all the time across the various jobs, various work orders, all of this through that split function on the time card. So once I've done that, I would save it. The screen comes back, and you'll see now that punch, you'll see that it's been split out. So here it's still search. So now you'll see the punch here is 8 hours, and then you'll see the various work orders and the time. So here in yellow are the work orders that I created and split the 2 hours. And then down here, only because I'm looking at all of my employees, if I just look at my supervisor, it would be easier to see. So sorry about that. So looking at my supervisor, I have taken his hours that he worked, and I added the work orders that maybe he might have worked that night. The one thing in Blueforce that's really great is it does have an audit trail, and at any time you can view the audit trail by clicking on View Audit. And from here it lets you know the original punches. The first line is usually always the original punch. And then the next one shows you what was done. This one says punch modified by split action because I added the work order. So on any and all lines of time, you can always view the audit trail. So here it lets you know, here's the punch in and punch out. I added it for the split, so this is the split time. It tells you right here, punch added by split action. So any time a punch is edited for any reason, whether you're changing the job, changing the task, changing the rate, or adding a missed punch, or even adding a work order, the system will highlight it and that'll be flagged in the audit trail for that particular punch. So those are some of just the basic things that you can do from time cards. So I'm going to go back to all my employees. So always remember, the first thing you do is select your jobs. What jobs do you want to work with? You can select an entire site, you can select an entire district, or you can work just specifically with one job. And it's always good to get in the habit of coming in and first saying, what do I need to fix? Show me my open issues. And then it'll tell you exactly. Anytime here in gray where it says timesheet is open, that just means that you're in your pay period, that particular timesheet is for the pay period. Pay periods are Saturday through Friday. So from the time card, those are just some quick little basic edits. You highlight the line of time you want to edit, you highlight the line of time you need to correct, and you just click Edit Time Card. And from here you can do, like I said, several different things, and always giving your reason code at the end. If you need to take a person's hours and split it, then you would go in and do split time. Let me look at more jobs here. So you can view audit, view map. The view map is, if you see these punches here, these are mobile punches. So the nice feature with the mobile app is you can view the map and it tells you exactly where this person clocked in and clocked out in regards to the address for the job site. So that's a neat little feature too with the mobile punch. The mobile punch is being primarily used with our landscaping crews because they move from job to job. So it's just easier for them to have their smartphone and they can group punch their entire crew. So if that might be something that might work at a building for you, you can always reach out to Christian and I, and we can help you get that set up. So once you have made all of your edits and your corrections, you can go to your timesheet view. And once you're in your timesheet view, you'll see some different things here. It gives you your reporting period, gives you the pay period. The reporting period is that week, if you're a bi-weekly payroll or weekly payroll, whatever, gives you that week that you're in, and then the pay period is usually the entire 2 weeks or 1 week. So from your timesheet view, here it tells you the statuses of your timesheets, whether they're open, exported, approved, and then there's also submitted. So as you're going through your payroll, you're going to come in here and there's several things you can do. And I like to have, or I kind of let people know or teach them, it's always good to tell the system, what are you looking for? So usually if you haven't submitted anything, you're going to want to look at your timesheet status that's open. So you're going to look at what jobs are open, what jobs, you know, here are my jobs, these are open, I need to get these timesheets submitted. So when you change your status here to open, and I've got my 6 jobs selected here, it's going to show me and give me now boxes where I can either submit all these timesheets together if I wanted to, or I can individually go in and review the timesheet, and I can say, okay, this person 3 hours, that's good. I can submit right here inside the timesheet. So you can do the timesheet by a group of timesheets by selecting open, change your status to open, and then now you can hit the checkbox and it'll select everything. I'm not going to do it right now because I got a couple of live jobs selected, but here it gives you that ability. If you're confident you don't have any red numbers, you can go ahead and submit all of your timesheets at one time. Or you can individually by just opening each timesheet. One other feature with a lot of the ISS that maybe share the job, you can click on this additional filters and you can filter it by task. And what that will do is, if you notice here, it's got all tasks and custodians. For those of you who are sharing job numbers and maybe are only needing to submit like custodians or any of the other special tasks, you can come in here and select the task of custodian. I'm in webinar, I'm using a test login, so I don't have like good task types listed here. But as you see here, you'll see custodian, you'll see supervisor, there's crew foreman down here. But if you select to filter by a specific task, when you go and open the timesheet, I wish I could show this better. You can open the timesheet and it'll divide it up to where you have a timesheet for supervisor that you can submit, and then it splits it out to a second timesheet where it'll say custodians. So if there's somebody who submits for the supervisor and you have a different person who submits for custodian, using this particular filter will split the timesheet to where different people can submit. So as a submitter, change your status to open. Again, you can select all your timesheets, submit them, open them individually, and submit them. So once you submit, that is going to trigger a message to your approvers that you have submitted your timesheet. Everything that I'm showing you about editing, all your editors, submitters, and approvers all have the same ability. So when I say you can go in and edit a line of time, all of the roles of editor and above can do that. So the difference between your submitter and your approver is just with the SOX compliancy. We can't have the same person submitting a payroll and approving the payroll. So once all your edits are made and you're a submitter and you're that first line of making edits and corrections and you've got it done, the payroll's due, you're going to submit your timesheets with the accurate corrections. You're going to submit those, and then your approver is going to pick them up, and they're going to just hopefully do a quick review and not have to make too many edits or additions. On this screen, you'll see that it shows you total hours, shows you any OT hours, other hours, and then of course the total timesheet hours. So on this main timesheet, if you see why does this job have OT, as an approver, you can always go back to your submitter and ask, why is there so much OT on this job? Or maybe there's OT there that's not normally there. You can go out and find out, what happened, or maybe there was an accidental punch that got approved and nobody missed it, because on the time card, sometimes it's hard. Actually, I should say that. On the time card, when you're looking at the total hours of the time card, if somebody worked 10 or even 12 hours, the time card is always going to show that as regular time. The time sheet is where your OT calculations will come in, and that's where it'll split it out to where if you have a daily rule, like 8 hours in a day, then anything over 8 hours is going to be OT. If you don't have a daily rule, then most jobs or most areas will have the weekly 40-hour rule, to where OT doesn't start calculating until 40. So there has been instances where somebody has approved that punch, not realizing that that was OT, and they approved and submitted it on, not knowing, and then it comes to realize that maybe somebody missed a punch, didn't clock out right, and the system closes the punch. Then you've got some extra hours there that should have been corrected and weren't. So always just kind of do a quick glance at your numbers for your jobs, regular hours, OT hours, and then as an approver, you too can always go in and say what's still open. So if you're looking for your payroll, you can go back and tell your guys out in the field, hey, these jobs still need to be submitted. Can you get them to me quickly? You can change your status to show you what's been submitted already that I can go ahead and approve or review. And I'm not going to have anything submitted. And then you can do what's been approved. So I'm going to show you, I don't have one. I'm going to go back and see if I can submit one of my old jobs. So I'm going to go ahead and submit this timesheet. So now if I go to my submitted, as an approver, I'm going to go look and say, show me what's been submitted. So now I see that I've got a timesheet out here that's been submitted that I can now approve, or I had a DM contact me and they need to make changes. So as a submitter, I can open this as an approver, I can open this timesheet and I can reject. Now, the thing to keep in mind when you are needing to reopen a timesheet that's been submitted, and this is only for submitted timesheets, it's a two-step process. You reject it. I don't have access to reject it on my webinar version. You would reject it. You would click reject, and then it will come back, and there'll be an option where a reject was that says reopen. If you do not click reopen, it's going to be in a status where here it says submitted. The status will be called needs changes. And that's a big one that I like to make sure and point out to all editors and approvers, anyone with Blueforce access. Before you submit your payroll, before you say my payroll's ready, always go to the timesheet status and just click on the one that says needs changes, and it'll list anything that was left in that needs changes status that needs to be reopened. Because again, unless it's reopened, you cannot make any edits or changes. That timesheet is still locked to any additional edits or additions. So it's always a good rule of thumb just to kind of bounce through your statuses to make sure that all of your jobs, and I know some of you have access to tons, But just to make sure that all of your jobs are submitted, approved, nothing is sitting out there with needs changes, because that's one that always gets missed. A timesheet gets rejected, but it doesn't get reopened. So it just sits out there in a needs changes status, but your submitter can't see that yet. So always, just as a quick rule of thumb, just do a quick needs changes, make sure there's nothing out there, and then go ahead and submit your payroll to corporate for processing. So I'm going to just go in here and do some edits on the timesheet. So from the timesheets, you can do a lot of the same similar edits you can on the time card. It's just a little different. On the timesheets, when you need to make any, if you need to add hours or make any changes, the one thing with the timesheets is you don't have to create an in or an out time. You can enter just the straight hours, whether it's 4 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours, whatever. You can enter the straight hours on the timesheet. When you're making edits and corrections or adding hours on the time card, keep in mind that you have to, on a time card, create the in and the out time. So it's a little easier, but you do want to try to limit your corrections. You want to make sure your employees are clocking in and clocking out. So as long as you're pretty vigilant with your employees about clocking in and clocking out, then the errors and the corrections you have to make on the back side should start being minimal. So I need to add some time, and as you can see here, for this timesheet, here's your lunch deduction. So there's an automatic lunch deduction set up, and you can see that on the time card. I'm going to see if I can open up one of these other timesheets that might show different calculations. So here is the timesheet for U.S. Airways hangar. And as you can see, there's no lunch deduction showing. Does not mean that the lunch deduction's not there. If you know on the time card the person worked 6.5 hours and on the time you see 6, the lunch deduction is there. It's just not showing on the timesheet. And that is a setting that Christian and I can turn on for you. It's on for most of the jobs, but every now and then there's a few jobs that display lunch line is not turned on for the timesheet. Some people want it on, some people don't, because it really clutters up the timesheet. Let me see if the other job has it. So this timesheet doesn't have the lunch deduction either. Doesn't mean it's not there, it just is not displaying on the timesheet. So here, the timesheet, you can see the same sort of highlighted that shows you that things have been edited. So here you can see the orange is modified from the web, so somebody's gone in and made some changes or corrections to that time or those hours. So going back to the timesheet, I need to add some hours. What I would do is add a row. Here's the job. Select my webinar employee. So make sure you select the job. Of course, it gave me my entire job list because I'm looking at 6 jobs. I had a long employee list because I have employees attached to all these jobs. So you'll just make sure you've got the employee, but up here at the top, if you want to just make sure you're working with your employee, you can set your employee at the top as well. And that way you're just working with that one particular timesheet. So I've got my job, and you can, again, if this employee has access to any of the jobs you've got selected, you can change the job, change the task, add the work order here on the timesheet, and you can just key the hours straight onto the time card. So I'll just add, he's a custodian, no work order, regular time, and I'll just give him 2 hours on Monday. And then you just save that line And as long as it doesn't conflict with anything, it's back. And now here in yellow, where up here it says added from the web, I added this 2 hours on Monday for this employee. It's just regular time. So again, the same similar edits and additions can be done on the timesheet as it can be on the time card, with the exception of like splitting time. The splitting time you want to do on the time card because you can allocate to the different jobs and allocate to the different work orders as needed. So you want to do those kind of things on the time card. Most other edits can be done on the timesheet, unless you're closing a punch, inputting and missing in punch or missing out punch. You'll want to do those. But if an employee just did not clock in or clock out for the whole day, you can come to the timesheet and just key the hours. If you did it on the time card, then you have to put in the in punch time and the out punch time. So that's the difference between the two, one of the differences between timesheets and time cards. So again, just to go back over, your time cards is your raw punches. That's just your total hours worked. You punched in, you punched out, total hours worked for that day. If you have an auto split set up on that employee, if there's OT rules, if there's shift differentials, if there's a lunch deduction, none of that is visible on the time card. All those calculations are done on the time sheets. So once you get to the time sheets, that's where you'll start to see your lunch. You'll see your shift differentials. The auto splits will be highlighted here on the time sheets. So if you had an employee assigned to multiple jobs, you'll see the multiple timesheets and you'll see the various hours. So I'm just going to kind of go over a little bit about the auto split. So I'm going to work with my employee, Edward. So most of you now, with our new granular security, have some access to the employee profile. Christian's gone over this multiple times in his webinars, but as you can see, anything in orange is stuff you can't edit. Things in blue are what you can. So now, if you have an employee that's covering for someone or you're sending him to a new job to work, now you have the ability to quickly add it to his working job. And the working jobs just means this employee has access to these jobs to clock in, whether it's on a clock, on a phone, whatever method they're using. So my employee, Edward, only can clock into these 3 jobs. Those are the jobs he has access to. But if I need to add a job, I can do job number. Most of you are very awesome about job numbers. I don't know all the job numbers. So you can key in your job numbers, pick go, highlight it. To highlight it, click assign. Once you see it in the list, make sure you save it. And now this employee has the ability to clock in and clock out at this job. It doesn't mean that they will, or even if they have access to 20 jobs, doesn't mean that they're going to have time on all those jobs. If they actually pick the job or key in the job, then yes, they'll have time on those jobs. If you need to remove, same thing, highlight the job, remove it from their access, click save. The one thing to note with Blueforce, if employees get changed to a different district or different jobs, JDE will always send the new stuff, but Blueforce does not remove the old stuff. And now you have the ability to go in and remove old jobs if you have to. An employee used to work at building A, now works at building B. They don't need to have the ability to clock into building A anymore. You can come in, remove it, save it, make sure you always hit save, and that'll take that job away. So that's an easy thing now, where you guys used to have to rely on Christian and I to help you. So now you can add the jobs. So auto split, Christian has touched a little bit on this. You can set up auto splits so that a particular employee might move. There's like a campus and there's 2 or 3 buildings pretty close to each other, and you need to allocate or equally spread time across those 3 jobs. The employee can come in, start their day, and clock in at one job. They can clock out at that same job number, making sure that it is one of the jobs on their working job. So they have to, in order for the auto split to work, they have to make sure you're punching in and out on one of the jobs on the auto split. And it's easy just to say, punch into this job, punch out the same job. So if the employee punches in on the U.S. Airways hangar job, you want them to punch out on the U.S. Airway job, and then the system will automatically split the various time across the jobs set up in the auto split. And like I said, you're not going to see the auto split on the time card. The time card's only going to show you the total hours. If they worked 6 hours, they clocked in at the U.S. Airways hangar, clocked out at the Airways hangar. 6 hours, you go to the timesheet, and you're going to see, depending on how you've allocated the time, and you'll see the multiple timesheets. So that's where you'll see the auto split, is that employee will have multiple timesheets, multiple jobs showing. So that's a nifty little feature that you guys have access to. Please note that it is in percentages, so you do have to make sure you have daily percentages that equal to 100, or your auto split will not work. And the other key feature on the auto split is this little checkbox that says active. You have to make sure that's checked, save it, and that's going to set up that auto split. If at any time you are making these sort of changes like auto split, or even changing the default shift for an employee, because now you have the ability, if you've got shifts set up on your jobs, you can change the default shifts, because you do need to have shifts created if you're going to do any type of shift differentials or any kind of, I guess it's all shift differentials, or any type of special pay for various times of the day, whether somebody gets $1 more, 25 cents more, whatever. You do have to make sure your shifts are set up in Blueforce so that you can assign the employee to the correct shift to when then those shift differential rules apply correctly. So here you have the ability now to go in and make sure your employees are set up to the correct shift, task, click update on that line, click save, and now you've got the correct shift and task for each of your employees. One thing to keep in mind whenever you're making any kind of changes like this, one thing that's not always mentioned and not always talked about, but we're getting better at doing that, is if you ever notice here on the far right of your timesheet, there's something here called request reprocessing. So auto split, if you did it in the middle of the week, is not going to backtrack to previous days worked. If you want the auto split to go back, you need to do request reprocessing. If your employee had a rate change in the middle of the week, again, it's only going to go in effect from the day forward that it reaches Blueforce. It doesn't automatically backtrack to hours worked previous. So you can do click request reprocessing. So you just click it. You can do open. Normally I just select all employees. What it'll do is go out and look for any of these changes and apply them to the timesheet. So we get that a lot. If someone had a rate change, people will say, hey, the rate change came in on Wednesday, but Monday and Tuesday the rate change isn't there. So you have to click the request reprocessing. That goes back, grabs those Monday, Tuesday hours, changes the rate for Monday, Tuesday. Same thing if we added shift differentials, we got to go back, reprocess so that it'll calculate the shift differentials for all hours worked previous to those changes being made in the system. So this is just a quick overview. Christian has been gracious enough to be answering my questions for me. So, but anything that we may not have gotten to, or if you continue to have issues or questions, always reach out to Christian and I. We are here to help you. And like I said, if there's that you're manually having to touch each and every payroll, reach out to us and give us your scenario, whatever it is, and we can work with you to try to get that set up to make the system do it for you. We want the system to work with you, not against you. That's what we're here to do. We really do want this to be painless, I guess, for lack of a better word. So once your time is approved for your pay period, once your approver has sent it all and wrapped it all up and says we're good, then that gets processed to corporate payroll. The one thing that we do have to kind of still assist you with is if the timesheet is approved and it hasn't been sent off to payroll yet, you do need to reach out to Christian and I to have approved timesheets reopened for you. It's a little lengthier process, so if you can get all your changes done before approved is clicked, it does make it a little easier to reopen those timesheets that are just submitted. So if you have an approved timesheet that needs to be reopened, please reach out to Christian and I, and we'll get those reopened as quickly as possible. So I hope I have covered enough of the basics. Again, this is just a basics review of going in and making some easy edits, easy changes, how to make some quick changes on the time clock, because the same sort of corrections that can be done at the time clock level is less that has to be done for your district managers or anybody who's logging into Blueforce. They'll be able to review those changes because they'll be highlighted, because like I said, Blueforce does have an extensive audit trail. Nothing can be changed without the system flagging it. Another thing, time does not get deleted. Time is always there, even if it's zeroed out. When you zero a punch, it just removes that punch from visibility, but that time is still always there in the system. So time does not get deleted. People can't just go in and delete time. So always keep that in mind when you're assigning people to have the access to go in and make changes and edits. Everything gets audited, and you can let them know this. Everything gets audited. Everything is flagged. So if they make a change to a punch, it's going to get noted in the system, so they need to be able to tell you why was this punch changed, or why did you edit this time. So the big key is we really don't want to touch people's ins and out punches, the in and out time. We don't want to make too many changes there. Of course, we do know that employee A can come in at 8 a.m., forget to clock in, run back, clock in at 10. So yes, we understand that you need to change. But we want to make sure the employees understand how to clock in and clock out, make sure they've got all the tools available to them to successfully clock in and clock out. Because if the frustration is at the employee level, then you're not going to get them to be clocking in and clocking out correctly, which is going to lead to more edits on the backside. So always reach out and let us know of any processes that are just stumbling blocks. It's just not working. Reach out, let us know. We'll work with you. We'll try to get it resolved as quickly as we can, because we want it to start at the employee level so they have a successful logging, clock-in experience, and then going forward, it just makes the whole payroll process easier. So we got to start with the employee and then go up the chain. So I will be having another basic seminar next month. We're going to be holding these monthly. Christian has his weekly tips and changes webinars also. Each week, 2 times a week. Be sure you read the emails that he sends out, because we are trying to incorporate any changes in the system, anything that users have been requesting some additional help, or the system is very robust and we're just scratching the surface on a lot of things that the system can do. As a reminder, if you need help You can call the EPAY support line 24/7, and you can also email them 24/7. You can contact Christian and I via the help desk or by also calling the help desk number. We ask that if you're having clock issues, and this is a big one with clocks because it's so much better, it is extremely important if you have a clock issue to call the support number, and the support number is on the face of the clocks, as long as, of course, you've got power to the clock. But it's better to contact them while you're there in front of the clock, because they can easily walk you through testing and just going over some configuration things on the clock. It's so hard to work on a clock the next day. So you can let your supervisors know, have them write the phone number down. If there's a clock issue, call immediately. It's harder to detect and troubleshoot clock issues like the next day. So again, you've got several ways for support, contacting EPAY support or contacting Christian and I for any help. So thank you again for joining me this afternoon on this basics class. Keep an eye out for more classes in the future. These will all be available on YouTube and on Gateway, so you can always go back and review anything. And if you have anything that you would like us to have a webinar on, always send suggestions to Christian and I, and we'll start working on getting webinars set up for those. We are going to be in the process of making a video of the clock procedures for supervisors to register employees and make edits. We're in the works of making a video for that, so that should be helpful. And I think that's about it. So again, thank you so much for joining me this afternoon, and if we didn't get your question answered, we will answer it directly to you. Thank you, and have a great day.